Hi everyone, this is Meteorologist Joel Curtis with your marine weather issued July 24th, 2023. Starting out with our sea ice edge, we've got a area of less than 80% from about Wainwright or so, almost over to Kaktovik. That area is melting fairly quickly, and it should take a few more days before it'll really break off and not be very much ice up next to the shore. Not expecting the main pack to retreat a whole lot, having just talked to the ice forecasters. For today's weather, we've got a 993 millibar low in the far western Bering Sea with a secondary system along the front. Got an occluded front coming up to the eastern Aleutians. And then we have some low pressure over the mainland with the thunderstorms we've been talking about. And also we have a 1,010 millibar low south of Kodiak Island, and that's really weak and it's dissipating pretty quickly. For Tuesday's weather, what we've got is generally the low is weakening out there for a temporary period. The cooler air is more on the south end of it, and it's a 998 millibar new low center. And then you can see that low that was near Kodiak Island is just about gone. And generally, broad high pressure over the Gulf of Alaska, a little bit of onshore flow for both the North Gulf Coast and southeast Alaska in the Panhandle. And then looking at Wednesday's weather, again, that high strengthens a little bit just south of the Gulf, about 1028 millibars or so, and a little bit of onshore flow, again, for the North Gulf Coast and on over to the Panhandle. And then we have out in the Bering Sea, the low is still weakening, but a good frontal system is really formed around it. Full occlusion with a little bit more cooler air, and that low that we saw that was to the south is really taking over. So let's look at today's marine forecast, or Tuesday's marine forecast for southeast Alaska. On the inside waters, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to about 3 feet, generally southerly direction. And then on the outside waters, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 6 feet. Part of that is a swell from the west. And generally, though, 3 to 5 feet or so in the main. And then for Wednesday's marine forecast, on the inside waters, it got some variable wind directions, with wind about 15 knots, seas 3 feet. And then for the outside waters, we've got generally westerlies, mostly northwesterlies, 15 knots, and seas up to about 5 feet with a little bit of west swell. For our south central forecast, we've got generally westerlies on the outside, ranging 15 to 20 knots, seas around 3 to 4 feet or so. Prince William Sound, 10 knots, seas 2 feet. And for Cook Inlet, we've got westerlies 15 knots down by Augustine, and then seas 3 feet there. Otherwise, generally a southerly direction, 10 knots, seas 2 feet in the northern part of Cook Inlet. And then for Wednesday's forecast, the southerlies really start to ramp up for Cook Inlet, seas up to 6 feet off of Anchor Point or so, and then otherwise 4 to 5 feet in Cook Inlet. And then we've got southwesterlies along the outer coast of the Kenai Peninsula, ranging 15 to 20 knots, seas up to 4 feet. And then generally westerlies 10 to 15 knots in the eastern sections, seas up to 4 feet. And then looking at the Kodiak Island and Alaska Peninsula for Tuesday, we've got southwesterly 15 knots in Chillicothe Strait, and seas about 4 feet there. And then we're looking at about 10 to 15 knots elsewhere, seas ranging up to 4 feet. And then for we've got on the Bering Sea side 10 to 20 knots, seas ranging up to 3 feet. And then for Wednesday's marine forecast, again, when we've got 25 knots southwesterlies, typical wind direction there for Chillicothe Strait, seas up to 6 feet. Otherwise, 10 to 20 knots on the Gulf side, generally a southerly direction, and seas 2 to 3 feet. And then on the Bering Sea side, 10 to 20 knots, seas ranging up to 3 feet. Now for the Aleutian chain, we've got going generally a southerly direction until you get to the far western Aleutians for a west wind, 20 to 25 knots. On the Pacific side, we've got seas up to 10 feet, and on the Bering Sea side, we've got seas as high as 8 feet. And then for our Wednesday marine forecast, again with that series of lows that's in the Bering Sea, wind ranging from 10 knots out in the far western Aleutians all the way up to 20 knots for most of the sections, seas up to 7 feet on the Pacific side, and seas up to about 5 feet with less fetch on the Bering Sea side. For the west coast, what we've got is generally southerly direction, a little bit of an easterly component with that low out in the Bering Sea. Wind down by the Pribilofs and St. Matthews, 20 knots, seas 7 feet. And then for Bristol Bay, only 10 knots, seas 1 foot or so. But then it ramps up to 25 knots off of Hooper Bay, generally southerlies, and seas up to 5 feet. For Wednesday's marine forecast, again, those 20 knot southerlies for the Pribilofs and St. Matthew, generally southeasterlies as we move up the coast, 15 knots in Bristol Bay, otherwise 20 knots and seas 4 feet as we go up the coast. For our Arctic coast, Tuesday, generally easterlies on the north slope, 15 to 20 knots, and seas up to 4 feet in those ice-free waters. And then some variable winds as you get into the Chukchi, but as you get down by Gamble, southeasterlies 25 knots and seas 5 feet. So a little bit heftier seas down south of the Bering Strait. And then for Wednesday's marine forecast, variable directions all the way over into the Chukchi Sea, only 10 knots, seas 2 feet in those ice-free waters. But then you pick up southeasterlies 15 to 20 knots all the way down into Norton Sound and the Bering Strait, and seas up to 4 feet. We'll file a float plan. Stay safe out there, and thanks for tuning in.